Today, we welcome to the Thriller Podcast a new young author, 2 books into the Surviving the Lion's Den series. Welcome to the podcast, Matt Scott.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. And thanks for saying I'm a young author. I'm 43. So I really appreciate that. You know, it kind of reminds me a little bit, when I tried to motivate myself to write the first book, I met David Baldacci in Williamsburg, and I asked him, I was 39 at the time, he was getting ready to be 40, and he's like, "Is 40 too old to write your first novel?" And I kid you not, he looks up at me like this and just says, "Hell no, the industry could use some good young writers." Now, I didn't know if I should be happier that this mythic guy was telling me to go forth with my destiny of writing, or that he thought 40 was young, but there you go.
A little bit of both. Quite a bit of both.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of people like Baldacci and these inspirations, I've seen you grinding since your first book came out, this self-starter, self-promoter, really just believing that everything is built on relationships. And to me, you cracking into the industry now with book 2, book 3 on the way, really lives up to, what was it, a Newton quote? The only reason I've seen so far is by standing on the shoulders of giants. It seems like a lot of people have laid the path, and you are willing to put in the work and the daily grind to, forge your own path.
I'm trying to. It's the publishing business has been a lot different than I thought it would be. So, I've had to really get creative in what I needed to do in terms of, book trailers, or, making videos on iMovie, or, creating just, new little, PowerPoint slides, or anything that I can do. So, success does not come without hard work, so, I can't sit back and just, wait and hope for, people to buy my books. I've had to really reach out to a community that I was totally green to, and it has been fun. It really has. That has been the fun part, trying to, the hustle has been hard, but, meeting new people, and, trying to spread the word, and hearing from people that I've never met before that tell me how much they like the books. That's all made it worth it.
There's not one voice in this community that doesn't cheer you on, no matter what you do. They don't see anybody as a competitor. They see you as, an ally and a friend.
Yeah, it has been incredibly, incredibly supportive. And I didn't actually know what to expect going into that, because, in any industry, competition's there. But from everything that I've seen, Brad Taylor wants Brad Thor to be successful. Michael Conley wants, Grisham to be successful, or whoever, because the better the genre is, the more readers it's going to bring in. So, because ultimately what's going to happen is the book that they're reading is going to end, and they're going to need a new title. So the more support they give to the genre, the better off everyone is.
Right. Like Brad Thor always says, 365 days in a year. It's a lot of books could be read.
So. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, another thing I got to say to you before we really dig into your first and second book, thanks for the swag. Part of the Matt Scott brand. This thing is just blowing up. You've got the coffee mugs, the pens, the stickers, the business cards. You got the polo on right there. Yeah, thanks for hooking us up with a lot of swag here.
You're quite welcome, and you'll get a third one coming up here pretty soon. I would have given you 2, but I was a little limited on budget this time around, so I'll make sure you guys get a set next time. But got to grease the wheels, got to hype your brand as best as you can.
Yeah, thinking of looking ahead, I know you have a release coming up in 2023. Have you put a month to it yet, or any idea of when we can expect a third book?
Yeah, the Ayatollah Takedown. I just got this from my publisher last week. The Ayatollah Takedown will be released on March 21st, 2023. And I'm working with my friend in India on creating a little teaser trailer. He just sent me the first draft today, actually. It wasn't bad, but there were some changes that I wanted him to make. So hopefully the teaser trailer's coming a little sooner.
Nice. I've really loved those as well. The first animated cover I saw was the Assassin series, the David Slayton series by Ward Larson. He had an awesome one recently with a sub on it. Uh-huh. And you've done the same thing. You've not only, you do have a trailer as well, The crew review guys I know have been pumping a lot of those cool trailers out too. That's a
Yeah,
really great idea, and I love seeing the animated cover of the missiles being launched on Iranian deception, and then the
right.
wolf. I think you had snow in the mountains behind the Tehran skyline. You've
Yeah,
got
the
some
line. Yeah,
visuals, audio visual stuff going on with the books.
yeah, and that was something that I just kind of stumbled on Twitter. I found a lady named Mary Schmidt, and I took a look at some of her examples, and I'm like, and it was incredibly cheap. So it was one of those things where I couldn't afford not to do it because you know I could, and it's only going to add to another angle of the brand.
Yeah. And as you know, listener of the podcast, we like to judge a cover by the book. And let me tell you, books 1 and 2, I'm judging pretty highly because these things relate right to the story. And I love seeing the Nazi flag in the top and the way you have the wolf on book 1 surviving the lion's den. You've got some great covers here. So I'm
Uh,
hoping your third cover will be released before March of next year.
oh yeah, and I'll get it. I will probably start working with the publisher. I would imagine around January. Because
Okay.
what'll happen is they give me a draft where they've gone through it, and they'll find some little changes here and there, and we'll go back and forth maybe 3 or 4 times. But one of the things I did when I submitted it to them is I put together a very a very crude drawing that I put together with images from the internet and told them, I was like, look, this is what I'm looking for. But their cover team has been fabulous to work with, and they've given me everything that I've ever wanted. I really expected the publisher to fight me a little bit on it, simply because that's where the collaboration really has to come in, right? There, your rights pretty much end because their rights begin, because it is the number one marketing tool. But they were all in on my vision of it, and they said, okay, let's go with that. So I'm hoping the same thing comes with number 3, because I think number 3 people are really gonna like.
Nice. Yeah, well, let's get into that. So the third book, it seems, is going to be maybe wrapping up sort of like a trilogy based on Iran.
Mhm.
How did you know, and why did you want to dig into Iran for these stories? And, from your posts and your blog and different things, you've really built a foundation of knowledge about this country and its role in the geopolitical landscape of
Right.
the Middle East. How did that come about, and how did you know that was going to be the setting for Tom, Ben, and Kirk to operate?
It came out of a couple different things for me. Number one, I was a big fan of the Da Vinci Code when it came out, and I really liked the way Dan Brown, the author, took the readers on a ride around Europe, around all these sites and stuff. So that kind of caught my eye. But Iran has always been interesting to me, simply because the U.S. in particular is so hated over there, and because of all of the economic sanctions and um, the fact that we don't have technically formalized diplomatic relations with Iran. No one from America can really go over there. I mean, you can, but you're at your own risk, and even if you do, you have to get clearance through Pakistan to do it, and they assign you a chaperone when you come in. So you're only going to get to see so much. So I always kind of thought it was interesting for me to do it, because not a lot of people from the West, especially the US, know what it looks like, what goes on over there. So it was an opportunity for me to really explore it. Even though I've read a lot of other novels, Joel Rosenberg is one of the best ones
Yes.
about Iran. You, Even though a lot of his books were set inside Iran, you didn't really get a sense of the geography of it. You did a little bit, but I really wanted to take people on a tour of Iran as much as I could through the 3 novels. And I, used my Kirk Carruthers character to do that in book 1. By book 2, it's a little bit more established. Ben Thrasher gets going a little bit, but I wanted to keep that element of exploring the country there, just because not a lot of people know about it, man. You may know one site here, one site there. You recognize, the Azadi Tower from the Argo movie, but people will know what it is. They don't know what it stands for, what it looks like, or excuse me, what its name is, and everything that is within it. I actually had a section in the original draft of them going inside a Zadi Tower, but I had to end up cutting it for word count purposes. So I viewed it as an opportunity to take readers on a tour of it, that in a way that they never have before, and then you add in all the spy elements and the personal story, and it just kind of came together for me. It was I wish I could tell you it was kind of a perfect storm. It was interesting to me, and I just sat down. I said, I'm going to do it. And sometimes, the water just started flowing for me.
Nice. Yeah, you got to run with those moments. You got to
Yeah,
let the current sweep you away, because that intuition really means something. You got to identify it and hold on to it.
yeah. And for me, I tend to be a really bad overthinker, but when I'm writing, my fingers are doing the walking. So all signal goes from here to here, and I just go with it. I don't give myself a chance to second guess it. I mean, that's what editing is for. So
Right.
one of my keys has been, if you got an idea, just go with it. The delete key is your friend. You can always go back and get rid of it, but
Right.
just go with it and get it out, because you never know where it's going to take you. And the best thing that has ever happened to me in this process is sitting down to write a chapter, not knowing where I was headed, and then
Ah,
finding a way through it. I mean, it is a tremendous feeling that I wish I could describe.
I like that. I have no insight into the world of writing. Never even considered attempting it, and but I feel like your workflow you just outlined there would really be how I would fit into it if I ever were to take a stab at it.
Take a stab, man. It's what's the worst that's going to happen? The worst thing that was going to happen to me is I would end up in shipping for another 20 years. So, I just one day I just decided I was going to do it. But that has been one of the more pleasant surprises, is being able to surprise myself, because I'll finish something and I'm like, damn, that was good.
I
And
like that.
then,
Yep.
you get on stage, you have a shot of Jack Daniels, you celebrate, and then, you move on to the next chapter.
Let's do it again.
Absolutely.
Let's get that back. Yeah. So I'm curious. You mentioned a few of your characters, and
Yeah.
you did a bit of a transition to Ben.
Yeah.
Who is going to really be stealing the show in book 3, if you could tell us?
Yeah, now Ben Thrasher's still going to be
Okay.
numero uno.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, I really like the Kirk character, and you'll still see him. Obviously, you saw him in book two in a little bit lesser capacity, but he was more important for me in book one, because I needed somebody, an everyday guy that the readers could follow and see Iran through his eyes. Um, because that was important for me to establish the Iranian geography as the base of the plot, right? And I guess I could have started out with Thrasher, but so many series have started out with a guy that did one thing or another. Then he went to the farm, and he ended up being, the best agent in the field. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I mean, plenty of authors do it. Greeny does it, Thor does it. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's all I'm saying for me is that I wanted to take a different approach, and I kind of planted the Thrasher seed in book one that allowed him to grow into book two. That way I didn't really have to start from scratch.
Right.
Because as soon as you hear Ben Thrasher, you're like, oh yeah, I remember him from the first one. Okay, now we're getting started with a new agent. So, but Kirk will always be there, because he's always kind of, he was my first.
I like that. Yeah, he was your first. Very special. Got to remember
Yeah, yeah.
that. Hey, that's great stuff. And I like what you said there about this on the ground view. I didn't realize it till now that almost might be what makes your books feel a bit different from some of the mass market thrillers I've been reading lately. I was not only experiencing this grand tour of the region, that Da
Mhm.
Vinci Code style or Brad Thor,
Yeah.
Europe hopping, plane hopping around,
Uh-huh.
but every time you're somewhere, you're with one of your characters, you're on the ground, you're getting the eye level version of events, which makes it feel really authentic from an operator standpoint or from an intelligence officer standpoint.
Right.
And
Right.
it almost can better capture the nuance of what they're doing, how they're maneuvering, and how they're kind of playing the game
Yeah.
versus these big from the top down views of of a city. I feel like I like being on the streets of that city. I just remember in book one with Tom and how it opens in the alley, in Iran, and he's
Hmm.
trying to escape. I just feel like you really bring the personal ground level viewpoint to your characters.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And for me, it was the best option for me because I don't yet have a lot of the government contacts that some of the big authors like Thor does. I mean, he's got contacts at the CIA, Defense Department, Homeland Security, whatever the case may be. So I don't have that yet. So I have to go on the research that I've done. And be able to give people the personal experience, because the personal experience is what puts you in the center of it. Because if you can understand why they're thinking the way they're, what they're thinking and why they're doing the way they're doing, then everything else, the statistics or the geopolitical environment or whatever, I won't say it goes away, but you kind of stash it in the back of your mind because you're sharing the experience with the character. So this was a case for me where I had to play my strengths because I don't yet have some of the contacts that the bigger authors have.
Yeah, that makes sense. Playing to your strengths. One thing I noticed is that you do have some female characters, and
Mhm.
we've spoken with a few of our authors about how it is handling and writing female characters. It was something I think Vince Flynn maybe was not his strong suit.
Right,
Uh, but Brad Thor, feels a little bit more comfortable doing it, and he rotates and has new female characters quite often.
right.
Uh, how did that come to you? And do you have any characters in mind that are going to play a big role next book?
You're going to see, well, you're definitely see more of Beth Jenkins
Yep.
in the next one. You will see Samine in book 3. She comes back. She plays a little bit bigger role simply because I felt like I hadn't done enough with her yet. And I think the role that I picked for her in book 3, even though it's a small role in terms of scale of character, the number of characters, but she does play an essential role. So I wanted to make sure that, she got her due. Um, as far as picking, female characters, um, I don't really have a rhyme or reason for it. I just thought there were certain cases where it just fit. Samine was a perfect fit because I needed, the romance angle with Kirk. Someone once told me, you can get away with it, but whenever you have a little bit of romance, it always has that one little element. Sometimes it's like a little bit of a cherry or sprinkle on top, and the romance angle always helps play well with the female readers. So that kind of brings them into it a little bit. But I envisioned Samine simply because I watched a YouTube video of, everybody's got a dash cam these days. So that really helped me do the research in Iran
Interesting.
by
From
all
the
the
ground
dash
level
cams.
again.
Yeah. And one of them, a guy was over there and he had a young girl with him, 20 or something like that. And she's what I had in mind for Samine. Now, the Beth Jenkins character, I I just kind of felt like, you know, if someone in her position, in that position, was going to feel responsible for Tom DeLange being kidnapped, I just kind of felt like a female character was better because something just hit me that the guilt complex would be really big there. And I think I made the right choice on that one. I mean, I could have gone with a male character, but um, the way I envisioned her character when I did the outline of her character, it was just something that really drew me to the fact that that character needed to be female. And you saw a lot more in book 2. She's a little, I won't say I butched her up, but she flexes her muscles in the intelligence world considerably,
Hmm.
and she does even more in
Hmm.
book 3.
And then maybe makes sense as well with just the trajectory of her career of now wanting to play a bigger role like that, or push a little bit harder, pull some more strings. And so I like seeing, I was going to say something I liked about Vince and now Kyle with Claudia, and Brad didn't do it earlier in his books, Brad Thor, but we've started to see it in his recent books. I like when a character is more long term, and the relationships with the main character and a female character, we
Yeah.
get to see evolve and change. One
Yeah.
thing, maybe just because it's on my mind with recency bias, the latest Brad Thor book we read, I wasn't too high on, and it's the third female protagonist in 3 books, and it's like just
Yeah.
a cycle and rinse, wash, repeat. And I want to see some more longevity and growth, the same way the main male character has an arc. I want to see an arc come through, and I feel like Beth Jenkins has maybe that potential.
Yeah. No, it's definitely there. Some writers just have, it's hard to say, why they do what they do. I mean, sometimes it works well, for their characters. I actually haven't read, uh, what's Thor's new one, Rising Dragon,
Rising Tiger, and part of your
Rising
book
Tiger.
takes place in India, so Rising
Yeah.
Tiger, I'd recommend that because his India scenes are also very on the ground.
Yeah. But I beat him to it. I beat him to the India angle.
You did have India
That's one
first,
thing
good.
I can say that I did, and I did it honestly because my book came out first.
Yep, yep. The
But
explosions in India make sense.
yeah.
Yep.
So I'm all about I enjoy longevity, and I just feel like when the time comes where the character I can't get anything else out of them, whether it be male or female, I'll find a way to either kill them off or do something else with them. But
Yep.
if you to me the longevity part of it is kind of fun because it allows me to challenge myself a little bit that way because I want people to endear themselves to the characters, and if I don't evolve them from book to book, I don't feel like they're going to be as vested. Now, it's no disrespect to anyone who does any differently, but for me, that was important.
Well, you mentioned killing off characters. Let me ask you: we've had some good ones in these books. What's your favorite kill that you wrote? Does something come to
Uh,
mind?
oh yeah, this one's tough.
Or that you've read? Have you read any recently that stand out to you?
No, I'm gonna go with mine. I think I still got to go with Shirazi getting killed outside the embassy in the first one because it was such a fun villain to write, and Farad, you wanted to root for Farad even though you weren't quite sure what side he was on. When he gives him that kick to the balls right
And let's
outside
not
the
say too much.
yeah, yeah, when he gives him that kick outside, something's coming, but he ended up getting what he earned. So that one was pretty therapeutic, I gotta say.
And guys, that's a good scene. So if you haven't picked up Surviving the Lion's Den, go ahead. You'll get there early on, and it will draw you right in. So was I right before I did mention this kind of feels like an Iran trilogy of sorts? Do you have plans to expand, move to other parts of the world? With your background, we were talking before we began recording, logistics and shipping, international trade.
Mhm.
You must have a lot of experience seeing and knowing how things move about the world. Is there anywhere else in the world you're itching to write about and maybe switch over to down the road?
North Korea, yeah.
Okay.
North Korea, yeah, that one's kind of like piqued my interest a little bit. I would like to do some more of Iran just because I think there's maybe a little bit more I can do with it, but my contract with my publisher is up after book 3. And from a business standpoint, I have to reevaluate, what I've put into it versus what's come back to me. So, but in the meantime, I've started doing a little bit of research here and there on North Korea, and it's been a lot harder because they really crank down on cameras a lot more in North Korea. So the research
Right.
I'm gonna have to do a lot more research on this one. But that being said, the research is fun. If you can't if research doesn't generate ideas, then you're doing it wrong.
Right. And I feel like I've heard so much about North Korea, and the guards will check your phone and they'll shadow you and they'll be outside your hotel room, and you'll go down to, the hotel cafeteria, and people will be watching you, and they put on these fake shows and the fake fruit vendor stands. All these
Yeah.
things I've heard or read about. I feel like a book and a novel could really paint a picture of that. that would help me access it in a different way, because hearing it, seeing a news report, a documentary can only go so far. Seeing that in a thriller, I just feel would be really unique. An American on the ground, or anybody really on the ground, an outsider in North Korea.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's kind of what I'm hoping. I mean, the big eye opener for me was of all the things I read, when I read Ric Flair's autobiography, he went to him and
Woo!
yeah, woo, the WCW guys went over and wrestled in North Korea in the late '90s, and he got to write his experience, and then the Dark Side of Wrestling on Vice Channel did an episode on it, so you got to
Hmm.
really hear their firsthand experience of what they went through, and that's what really started lighting the fire for me, because I was like, there is so much oversight there. You can play with anything,
Yeah.
because with the oversight that they have, even if what I write may not actually be true, it's believable enough. It's going to be believable enough that they will probably believe it anyway, because they are capable of it.
Well, and also the true stories that people write about experiences and memories there can only go so far. Where in a thriller novel, you can push the envelope and play
Oh,
with a lot
absolutely.
of what ifs that you're never
Oh
going to
yeah.
get from somebody's experience. Because if they're
Oh
writing
yeah.
about it, they definitely didn't push the what if
And
side of
no,
things.
no. I mean, the what ifs are where we live.
Yeah, exactly.
It always kind of bothers me a little bit when I've gotten some of the feedback I've gotten. Was like, well, you had to suspend disbelief a little bit here. I'm like, look, I didn't have this wasn't a thriller novel where I had vampires and zombies running around the
Right,
street. I
right,
mean,
right.
it is fiction a little bit. I do have to push the envelope a little bit. I won't give it away what happened in Surviving the Lion's Den, but there is an escape that happens. Uh, is it reasonable to think that something like that could actually happen? There's a 10% chance. I mean, with what happened, obviously you generally want to be, experienced in order to do that. But,
Right.
the situation that I put them in, they had no other choice. So to me, that's where fiction lives. So if you don't,
Yeah.
if I'm not exploring that, and if I'm not taking, the readers on that ride, to me, what's the point?
Right.
I as a thriller reader, I know, where the limits are. How much I can get away with, simply because when I read Greeny and Thor and Flynn and Mills, they tell me how much they can get away with because I'm reading it.
And they go
So
there.
yeah, exactly. And that's where the learning experience as a reader comes in and translates to writing, because, they know their audience. I am that audience. And now I'm writing to the same audience. So
Yeah.
circle of life, Simba.
There it is. Yeah, in some ways, if someone would say, "Oh, that can't be done," well, if it's something that could be done, I don't really want it in a thriller, because it's too real. A
Yeah,
thriller should have this element of escapism, not completely escapism, but grounded in reality. I forget.
exactly.
Oh, faction. That's what Brad Thor called it
Correct.
for us.
Yeah.
Was faction.
Faction.
It could
Absolutely.
be a fictional story that seems beyond reality, but it's grounded in so much fact and research that
Exactly.
you buy it. You're in it for the story, and it's grounded in real life background that you buy it. So let me ask
Exactly.
you, back to Iran for a second. You've done a lot of studying of this and their regime and the Ayatollahs. What do you know about Iran, having done all this and driven around Google Street View, that we don't know but we need to know? What do we need to know for the future of the world that we don't?
The Iranian underground that I wrote about with Farad's character and Danya's character in the Iranian Deception, it's bigger than people think,
It's strong.
and it's stronger than people think. The problem is that as long as the Revolutionary Guard is holding the guns, they've got the edge. But as the sanctions move forward in Iran, uh, the stronger they get, because we're coming we are now in an age where you can't live without a smartphone or an iPhone or Facebook. Instagram is allowed in Iran, but it's still blocked, censored a little bit. Twitter
Sure.
is not. So you know, freedom will ultimately prevails. It's just a matter
But
of
on
time.
whose timeline? Yeah,
Yeah,
whose timeline?
exactly. So it's going to be interesting for me to see what happens, uh, after Ayatollah Khamenei's reign is over. I've heard that he's suffering from, I've heard blood cancer and I've heard liver cancer. So I don't know which
Mm,
is true, and it's hard to tell which. Um, the Iranians are known for grandstanding, but a lot of it they do because they want you to look here while they're actually doing something over there.
right,
Um,
right,
but the one thing is for sure, as the reign of the Ayatollah goes on, I mean, once Khomeini passes and it goes to what I think will be his son, you're now in the third generation of the Ayatollah, the Grand Ayatollah. And generation three is usually where, things start to pull apart just a little bit.
right.
So, will we see it in my lifetime? I don't know, but, my gut instinct tells me it's going to be more sooner than later.
Mm. And you get to deal with a regime change in book two. So again, the what
Yeah.
ifs, you really get to push the boundaries of what would that look like.
That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun, because I had to do my research on what happened with Ayatollah Khomeini after Ayatollah Khomeini died, and it turns out he didn't even want it. A video leaked when he was in the meeting with the Guardian Council, and they said, "This is over. You're doing it." And he actually kind of put his hands in his face like that, and now look where he is. So it was kind of fun to play with that a little bit, and I do hope that within the next 5 to 10 years we'll see it change over again, because I think that's where the beacon of hope in terms of the geopolitical hope turning the country around may reside.
We started seeing some hope, speaking of that, and it must have been a little earlier than when you were researching these books, but the Green Revolution and the Arab Spring movements.
Yeah,
I feel like maybe it's a COVID pandemic, or maybe it was Syria even. We just haven't heard a lot about Iran, and for a while it felt like due to technology, a lot of academics were finding their voice, and community organizers and different social justice movements, and the young people were really starting to build momentum. Is it just me not having heard about that the last couple of years? You're saying that's still continuing, and that base is still, it's things are still bubbling and soon
I
to be
think
boiling over.
I think they're bubbling below the surface a little bit less
Mm.
than they were. The
Early
current president.
2010s.
Yeah, I think the current president of Iran has been a little bit more lenient, um, than his predecessor, so that makes things a little bit easier. Then the sanctions eased up at the end of the Obama era.
Right, right.
Um, that's a different discussion altogether, but they did ease up a little bit. So they gave him a little bit taste of freedom a little bit. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's kind of calmed down. I think COVID definitely had an effect, but with Iran, it all depends on how much you want to kick the hornet's nest.
Right.
So as soon
Poke
as
the
you
bear.
kick it, yeah, and they start getting into elections being fixed and things like that. That's when you start seeing things blow up. Um, that hasn't happened in a while, but that also kind of worries me because you saw Hamas attack the Iron Dome, you know, last year. So, and I mean, Iran was definitely behind that,
Right.
and so nobody pointed the finger at the Iranian government per se, but
It's all by
everybody knew.
proxy.
Yeah, everybody knew it was them, and I actually include that in the third book because I think they were testing it. I think
Right.
it was like in Jurassic Park, the Velociraptors are testing the fences for
Right,
weaknesses,
right, right,
right?
right.
So it's actually kind of scary when Iran gets quiet. When they get loud, it's more grandstanding, and you can kind of
Yeah,
figure out where their BS starts and where it ends.
yeah.
It's when they're quiet that you have to be more concerned
Mm.
because that's when the black ops operators are doing probably, I think, the most work.
Yeah, I also wonder their capabilities because we the first thing that comes to mind is, the nuclear deal, they're
Yeah,
trying to make a nuclear weapon. I
Yeah.
sometimes wonder what else they have planned while all the attention is on that. And they can kind of have some gamesmanship with, but we closed this facility, we allowed inspectors in, and then a couple months
Right.
later, oh, that facility seems to be maybe up and running again.
Yeah.
Is all that a ploy, maybe covering something else? I don't know. Maybe cyber, how involved are they in cyber? Just who knows? But I like what you said about when they're quiet, it's the time to question what's going on.
And yeah, the Iranian intelligence is actually, I think they're a bigger threat on cyber than China is. Um,
Interesting.
they've proven themselves to be much more effective. The FBI director once compared the Chinese hackers as burglars breaking in and bumping up against lamps and things like that. The Iranians tend to be a little bit more precise,
Mm.
but the reason the reason they have to be is because they have to look at what they're fighting. They're always fighting their counterparts in Israel, so they can't afford to be bumping into furniture and things like that. So they have to be more precise. So their struggle against Israel has actually sharpened their skills more than people give them credit for. But I'm probably more concerned on the Iranian front of the deals that they're making on the side with Russia. Russia's obviously got their hands full with Ukraine right now, but um, the Iranians and the Russians tend to have a very chummy relationship, and
Hmm.
China's starting to flex its muscles a little bit more. So I'm trying to stay on top of the relationship building that's going on over there, because it is, to me, it is a recipe for one hell of a fire.
Or a thriller novel.
Or a thriller novel.
Yeah, money talks in these relationships. So I know China's
Yeah,
splashing the cash with the
and I
Belt and
do touch
Road.
on
And
that a little bit
yep,
in the third one. You'll see that, and
yep.
that's a little bit of a teaser. You'll see that in the third one.
All right. See, all examples of how your books are really grounded in reality that, we are we're transported there. And it's our world, but it's not our world. And a
Yeah,
thriller should balance that perfectly.
absolutely.
Kind of a question out of left field while we're on threats and whatnot. And any
Yeah.
of our listeners who are like, just get to the fiction, stop. I'm a history teacher and a geography teacher. So
Uh-huh,
I'm very much up on the geopolitical and reading every one of the headlines.
uh-huh.
You were in logistics and shipping. Makes me curious and I've had this on my mind forever. I even brought it up to Brad Thor. I see as one of the biggest threats to the world, straits. And I always wonder if you were going to put one in a thriller that could really throw the world off. Are you having the Chinese close Malacca? Or are you having the Iranian shut down Hormuz? Are you having some sort of issue in Panama? Do you see a story there that these global choke points that a lot of our commerce, a lot of our energy, a lot of our industry manufacturing rely on, aren't they vulnerable?
They're incredibly vulnerable. The Strait of Hormuz, I touch on in the Iranian deception. I don't think that they could get away with it,
Right.
just because. I mean, they can try it all they want, and they can shout about it all they want. There's no way the international community is going
Right.
to let that happen. Um, Panama Canal, I think, is prime for a really great thriller. We saw what happened, not in Panama,
Oh,
but
and,
the
and
Suez
Suez,
Canal.
the Ever
Yeah, when the
Givens. Yep.
ship got stuck.
I was
I mean,
fascinated by that.
yeah,
Fascinated how that threw off the world. Like, people
hmm
thought the worst part of that was waiting an extra 3 months for your IKEA sofa or whatever. No way. There were some
yeah,
huge. I think that was a testing ground, if I'm being honest. I really
yeah,
think that was proof of concept.
yeah. And I think that gave it could give some ideas to some really bad people,
Right.
because
Exactly.
I experienced that firsthand at the shipping company. And it what people don't realize about the shipping aspect of it is a delay like that, even if that ship gets stuck for, what was it, it was 7 to 10 days, wasn't it, something like that? I think it
Yeah.
was eight is what I remember.
Hmm.
But all the cargo that backs up into the ocean that can't
Right.
get through there, I mean, you're
Right.
talking months. The shipping
Yeah.
delays can would cripple the economy
Exactly.
of this country, and we came darn close to it this past year. just because people were ordering so much during the pandemic, and people just didn't see it coming. The volume increases, but if you shut down those ports, I mean, you're shutting off supply, and it is prime for an attack. So I would say the straits are definitely vulnerable, and I think that even more so, attacks on the ships at sea could
Right.
happen.
Right.
You could definitely see that happen because we saw with the Somali pirates incident. A
Right.
lot of those ships do not come equipped with guns.
Right.
So if somebody's tried to attack the ships, in an organized attack, there's nothing that's going to stop them. I
Yep.
mean, the international community will respond accordingly, but that's all going to be after the fact.
Yep. And there's a great book I was reading. Oh boy, I wish it was a few years ago. It was a female journalist who embedded herself on a cargo freighter, and it was just unbelievable, the life she was describing. And of course there's law and whatnot and international treaties and agreements, but she was like, this is the Wild West out here. you
It really
know
is.
it is the Wild West. There's no one coming for you. There's no one
No,
coming to help you in a lot of ways. And
no,
maybe the era of the US dominance, of the sea lanes, I just don't know if we have the willpower or will in 5-10 years to be as forceful as we could be. Because the whole freedom of the seas, basically America's naval military might allowed that, and that's why
yeah,
we have such a interconnected global economy.
yeah,
I don't know if that's going to be the standard 5-10 years from now, and beyond. Who knows? Like a bipolar system, right? It's not just America ensuring
right,
freedom of access to the waterways. Now you're gonna have a tripolar system: us, the Chinese, the Russians, or who else? Because the Russians in the Arctic. Anyway,
yeah.
let's bring it to a lighter note. We're getting pretty heavy here, so let's lighten the load. What
Okay,
have you been
okay.
reading? We like to wrap up our interviews with a plug for any media. Could be a book, could be a TV show, could be a movie. What's on Matt Scott's watch list?
I've got a couple of things right now. I've been meaning to get to it. I'm not now 50 pages into it. I'm into David McCluskey's Damascus Station.
Fantastic book.
Um, I just got I read a couple of pages into Baldacci's 620 Man, but then Heat 2 arrived on my doorstep. And I loved Heat 2. I mean, the original movie Heat so much. I'm like, I gotta dive into it. I'm like, I actually said I'm sorry to the David Baldacci book because I had to dive into Meg Gardner and Michael Mann's Heat 2.
Nice.
Um, Streaming wise, I pretty much knock out the stuff that I want to see pretty fast. My wife and I, we watched The Lincoln Lawyer, which was based on the Brass Verdict from Michael Conley, and we knocked out the Terminal List uh, within 2 days. So streaming wise, I'm looking for the next big thing, and hopefully maybe one day that it'll be mine. Who knows? Fingers
Right,
crossed.
you gotta dream.
You know, I did send a copy of my first book to Robert Rodriguez because I love Desperado and Sin City. If I figured, what is he going to do? Say no? You got to try. So streaming wise, I'm one of those guys that when I find a series, I tend to knock it out pretty fast. But I'm also one of the guys that goes back and I will rewatch and rewatch and rewatch some of the great spy movies. I love Patriot Games. I love The Hunt for Red October, and I never get tired of watching them.
Love
Absolutely
that.
never.
Fantastic. Well, how about you tell the folks where they can find you? You got a great website, great social media presence. Let the people know how they can get in touch.
They can always get in touch with me on the website. There's a contact form there that sends directly to my email at mattscottbooks.com. And then you can also get a hold of me on Instagram or Twitter at mattscottbooks for both. And then if you want to get a hold of me on Facebook, just send me a friend request. I don't have a business account. I just accept the friend request. And I'm a little bit more dominant on both Facebook and Instagram than Twitter, just because Twitter's not my favorite. It's okay. It's just not my favorite. But one thing is for sure, if you message me, no matter what, I will get back to you. And I take anything, any contact, or any message that comes to me, I take very, very seriously from anybody. So feel free to reach out. I love talking to people about my stuff, any books. So I would love to speak to you.
Love it. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for talking about surviving the lion's den, the Iranian deception, and everybody get ready for the Ayatollah.
Ayatollah Takedown.
There it is, March 2023. Perfect. Well, thanks,
Got
Matt. It
it.
was a blast talking to you.
Thanks, Mike.